All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, sports fans, boys and girls. Welcome to another edition of the Beau Payne Show podcast. I am so excited for everybody to listen in today. We have another absolutely amazing guest. I know I say that every week, but this may top. Well, I don't want to say top them all, but she's as good as it gets. I'm not going to introduce her quite yet. I want to talk to Brianna real quick. Introduce my wonderful producer Brianna Miana Mina, and ask you how your week's going today. So what's up, Brianna?
My week's been going good, just taking a little time off from work. Still hiking, doing a lot of the hiking. So
Good. In Hulls Gulch, Boise area?
yeah, Hills Gulch.
Nice. Okay. All right. So before we get into it, tell our listeners about your channels, where they can find you.
Yes, so you can find my YouTube channels at Brianna Mina, just my name, and you can also look up True Crime for Life, and I story tell on true crime.
All right, fantastic. So before we get into it, I want to ask my listeners and viewers to go to wherever you get your favorite podcast forum: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Odyssey, Amazon Music, and much more. Please hit that like button, subscribe, hit that bell so you get notifications on new shows. And also my YouTube channel, The Beau Payne Show. Please go to that on YouTube. Haven't given a lot of attention to it, but I'm going to start. I say this every show, but I'm going to start, putting a little more emphasis on that channel and starting to grow that too. So like and subscribe if you will. It'll help the algorithm, help us gain viewers. We really believe in our content that we're putting out here to try to help as many men and women as possible who may be struggling out there overcome. So help us out, hit that bell, like, subscribe, and get into it. So today's guest, wow, we've been following each other on social media for probably about 4 years, I guess. We were introduced by a couple mutual friends. Man, and I say true redemption story. A lot of our guests, it just doesn't get any better than this. So I'm again jazzed and geeked as a fan and a host to have my friend here with us. She's been in recovery from drugs and alcohol, 11 years, 4 months, and a handful of days. So she's working on 12 years, but it's always one day at a time. My guest has been incarcerated in state penitentiaries 3 different times. She's turned her life completely around. She's a mother of 3, a UW, University of Washington graduate, wonderful college. She's been a guest on many national publications, the New York Post. She's been a guest of Tucker Carlson. She's a tireless advocate for, I'm just going to say, all things good. So my friend Ginny Burton, welcome to the Beau Payne Show. How are you?
I'm good, Beau. Thanks so much for the wonderful introduction. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're just jazzed to have you. So, Ginny, like I've told you, and like I've told I say to my listeners, the goal of my show is just really interesting and great conversations with really interesting people, and we just kind of let her flow and go where it ends up, and organically, and we have a good time. So, I'd just like to ask you, kind of like it is in the rooms, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. Tell your story, and then I'll jump in a little bit, and we'll just have a great conversation. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most of the world knows my story, but I'll give you guys a recap. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. So
Thank you.
I grew up in a drug addict household. I didn't know it was a drug addict household. I had big plans, for my life. At a young age, I was an Excel student and tested as gifted very young, and academically excelled and pretty much with anything that I tried to do. But my dad, our house was raided when I was 4 years old. And so I watched detectives kick in the doors and take my dad. And that was when that was in 1976. So that was when my relationship with the Department of Corrections in Washington State began. I had absolutely no idea that that would be the catalyst for a very interesting future. I wanted to say needless to say, however, I don't think that that's an appropriate term right now, but at the age of 7, drugs were introduced into my life, and from the person that I was supposed to be able to trust the most.
Sure.
But this is the thing when it comes to that statement. Today, as a 51-year-old woman, I I've learned to give people grace. I truly believe that human beings do the best that they can with what they have. And so, I don't condemn my mom today because I don't think that she had the skill set to do anything different than what she actually did. And also, there is the fact that I am happy and content with who I am as an individual. I love myself, and I love all of the parts of me, and those parts of me wouldn't be who they are or what they are without my experience. And so I really think that everything is always to the good. Now, I didn't always believe that. So,
Yes.
but my life, even though I didn't want anything to do with drugs because I knew that drugs were a problem, they were what caused my dad to be taken away. I sought love and acceptance more than anything else, really. And so I immersed myself in a life that felt very contradictory to who I was on the inside. And, even at a young age, I was very aware of what I believed was right and wrong. But, when you can't beat them, join them, right? And so,
Of course.
I think that any child wants love and acceptance, and so I really just sort of sunk into something that just felt like it wasn't me, and then it became me. And just like anything else that I do, I tried to be the best drug addict that I could be, which doesn't necessarily mean that I'm better at it than other people. It just means that I gave my addiction my all.
Yeah.
And in time, I became all of the things that I didn't want to be. I immersed my life, in that environment. And I married people that were synonymous or familiar. They looked just like the abusive relationships that were fostered in my home. And, so domestic violence is a huge part of my story. Early pregnancy is a part of my story. I was married in a relationship with my mother and then was somebody who resembled my mother. And so, and my mom and I were drug partners for a long time. We served 2 different prison sentences together. I have 17 felony convictions. Like you said, I've been in and out of the carceral system in Washington State. Did 3 separate prison terms for different charges each time. As a result, I abandoned my children to the child welfare system, and also had never developed the skills to actually be the parent that I envisioned in my mind, because of course, we always want to do better than our own parents in a specific area. And, and I definitely was honest, which was very different than my mom, but I was still my mom in a whole lot of ways. And so, I was full of hate. A lot of things happen in that kind of life, and a lot of those things happened to me. And then I started doing things to other people. And so, Wayne Dyer, I'm not sure if you're familiar with who Wayne Dyer is. There's this thing that he says, and it's, if you squeeze an orange, what comes out of it? It's orange juice every single time. You're not going to get apple juice. You're not going to get pear juice.
Every single time. Not 99%, but every single time.
And so, and I was full of hate. And so when I was squeezed, that's what came out of me every single time. And so at the age of 40, now my 3rd prison sentence was not my last interaction with the criminal justice system.
Okay.
After I was released, I went into prison that time clean, because I was in a day reporting program. So I had gotten arrested for possession of stolen property, a number of counts. And I was in jail long enough to gain that clarity, right? So a lot of people talk about my incarceration with intention. So this is where it sort of starts. When a person goes into jail, prior to this harm reduction model that we have seen unroll in our world. When a person goes into jail, you're separated from your destructive path. And so there's an acronym that I've coined, which is SSA, which is Separation, Services, and Accountability, right?
Okay.
When you're separated from your destructive path, it's an opportune time to implement necessary teachings or services, right? And so when you're in jail, often what we get the opportunity sometimes to do church services or 12 step, right? And so so I did that because I gained some clarity, and I was able to, reach that part of myself that I had been introduced to my second time in prison. Because the second
Okay.
time I went to prison, I was introduced to the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And what that did was give me an opportunity to learn how to live a little bit differently, right?
I was going to ask you, did any of these previous jail or prison stints plant seeds as far as introduction to 12-step or faith-based?
Not necessarily introduction to 12-step with those stays, but what they did do, this is what happened for me every single time I got locked up, is I would create the plan, right? What I don't want to do this again. If the time was long enough. Now, if I was just in jail for a week or two, probably not. I'm waiting and figuring out how I'm going to get my next one. But if I have a long enough period, which is what happened on this third time, right? The long enough period, which was 30 days. And that's kind of a sweet spot, right? 30 days without drugs is kind of a sweet spot. It gives me personally an opportunity to have some clarity and say, dude, I'm tired of doing this to my life. And that's what my other stays did, right? What my first prison term, it was 14 months. And I was going to do some stuff different. I knew I was a drug addict. I knew I was a drug addict when I was a teenager. And of course, my goal was to be the best one that I could be and do as many different kinds of drugs as I could. Because guess what they did? They provided me an escape from my reality that I didn't have the skill set to navigate, right? So, but as I got older and my life spiraled out of control even more, I was pretty sure that my problem is that I had never had a job. So my first time out of prison, I was like, if I just get a job, right? And of course, I knew drugs were a problem, so I wasn't going to use, but it wasn't necessarily on the top of my priority list. The job was, because I had never had a job, right? So I'm in my early 20s, never had a job. I was pretty sure if I got out and got a job, then I could afford to get a place to live and I'd be able to raise my 2 kids that were being taken care of by my husband's mom. Well, within the first 24 hours of my release, I was already drinking. I went down to my brother-in-law's apartment, which was below my mother-in-law's, and I was drinking some 211s. For anybody that knows what a 211 is, that's what the alcohol does.
I sure do.
So by the next day, of course, I was still drinking, and I went to a job interview. And I'm certain that I reeked like alcohol. So they never called. But then I had to go up to my mom's place because she had gotten out right before I did. And of course, they were all using, but I looked good. I was healthy. Yeah. I just wasn't going to do any meth, but drinking was fine. So I wasn't going to do any meth. So, it was good. So
drinking never leads to anything.
Right. So I maintained that for I like to say 2 weeks, but it was probably more like maybe 5 days at the most.
I was going to say 2 or 3 days, 5 days. Yeah.
So maybe we'll give it 5 days, right?
Let's call it 5. Let's give you the benefit of the doubt.
But of course, I was shooting dope again in a matter of days, and and I was spiraling out. So I ended up, of course, getting more dope, committing more crimes. I was shot. I shot somebody else, and I got into a massive high-speed car chase with 4 different police departments in Pierce County. And
out of Tacoma, or
yeah, I'm from Tacoma, born and raised in Tacoma, and
I'm familiar. Hilltop.
Yep. So within 7 months, I was going back for another 5 years. So, but it was during that time, without a doubt, I knew for a fact I was a drug addict and things needed to change. And what needed to change was I needed to stop using drugs, period. Right.
So this was your second time, Ginny?
This was my second trip.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and I had a little bit of
time. So you're cognizant of the fact that you really need to change at this point in time.
Yeah. I need to stop using drugs because drugs are the problem. Right. Drugs are the problem. I'm coming in I have a big old scar on my arm. I have a scar from here almost down to my elbow from the car accident. My humerus was broke right up here. I was limping around because, of course, I was shot in the femoral artery, so I couldn't walk right. So I came in a matter of 7 months, going from a 22-year-old vibrant, strong girl to a 22-year-old war veteran. And
I know we had the viral mugshot seen around the world. Is this at this point in time, or
no? That was later.
Later, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that was later. I'll have to get those mugshots. I don't even know how many times I've been arrested, but it's been a lot. But no, so that mugshot I was in my 30s. So that was in 2005. So this is back in 96. So 97, I think I was arrested in 97. And so that time, my second time. So So I go in and mine doesn't matter what, I am not doing drugs. Right. And I made the most of my time while I was in prison. I went to school. I was a teacher's assistant. I ended up in the dog program where I was training dogs. And then I was introduced to the program through somebody who was in prison on a relapse.
NA?
So, what's that? Yeah.
NA. Okay.
Yeah. But this is the thing. At that point, like, I didn't care. I would go to any meeting. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right?
I went to every chapel service meeting, you name it. I mean, just get out of the cell.
Yeah. And so when I got out, I moved from Tacoma to Seattle, and it was a world of difference. And the first thing that I did, because it was suggested to me that I get to a meeting within the first 24 hours. So that's what I did. And I introduced myself, and surprisingly, I opened my mouth to say my name, and I've turned beet red and almost passed out. Now you can't shut me up. So, the blessings of recovery, right?
Blessings of recovery.
Yeah. So I made it another 9 years before I went back. Now, that doesn't mean I made it another 9 years before I got loaded again. I made it a couple of years, almost, let me see. I relapsed, I think, in 2002.
Okay.
So I had gotten out in 2000. So I made it 2 years, but my grandmother died. Right. And what I hadn't done, I had learned how to get a job. I learned how to pay bills.
Okay.
And, I had definitely a lot of issues. I had a Penske truck full of baggage that came with me from, the years that I had lived in Tacoma and grown up in insanity. I was still failing my children as a parent, and I ended up shooting some dope. And again, in Seattle, the laws are a little bit more lax. So you get booted out, you go to jail, and you'll get booted out until they file on you a number of months later, if they file on you at all.
I was going to say, if they even do. Yeah.
If they even do. And so now it's just the Wild West in Seattle. But back then, it took me another 7 years in and out of recovery, and strung out. And during that time, that came that mugshot. So I was in a relationship. I left the relationship. I ended up going and fishing right before I relapsed out in Alaska. And I was on a boat with a bunch of guys. And I was severely sexually harassed, but I stayed my entire contract. And then I sued the shit out of them. And so
good for you.
I normally don't.
No, you're fine. I spent a year and a half in Ginny, I spent a year and a half in Fairbanks in the Army. So, but we saw all the guys, it's the Wild West. It is. You talk about the Wild West. I mean, it is.
Well, they had another thing coming with me though, because I'll tell you what
you're tornadoes in a good way these days. So yeah, good for you though. No,
and I don't take crap. And so I ended up suing them.
Heck
and,
yeah.
I paid a bunch of bills off when I got that money. And I got the money after I had relapsed and then came back. But of course, like any good drug addict, right? I paid my bills off. I got myself a car, got a nice place. And then, I had $30-something thousand left over. So I'm we'll go do some dope.
What are we going to do now?
Party was at my house,
Oh, geez.
And so that picture really was sort of in the midst of some of that. I had a bunch of money and I was doing a bunch of dope. I probably weighed about 96 pounds. So I'm 5'9".
Okay.
I looked like I probably walked out of Auschwitz if you saw me in person. And I remember, in the specific red jumpsuit picture, I was driving my Camaro with my daughter's dad, and it was purple, and it was like 3 a.m. And I lived off of Aurora in Seattle. I lived on 95th and Linden. So they pulled me over, and guess what?
Good old motels up on Aurora.
Yeah, well, I had an apartment up there, but I was just
you're high living then, not in the motels.
So,
oh my goodness, your story and mine.
I was
parallels,
right? But
yes.
So I didn't have much else to do except for smoke crack and shoot speedballs, and so I was pretty emaciated. And I used to say I would get pissed off, right? Because I'd go into like Fred Meyer's and they'd follow me around, and I'd whip my wallet out like I have money. I just look like
cash.
Yeah, I just look like this. I'm not going to steal your stuff, man. So, but I was a great decoy for my booster friends. So there's always that. But,
going to say there's probably more than meets the eye to that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, but anyways, I ended up getting arrested. And of course that was my mugshot. And I used to say, it costs a lot of money to look like this. And, which is it's not a lie,
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's true.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it is. I mean, and I was fine when I was going through it. Like, I just didn't care, right? I was blotting out my reality, the reality of being a failure in a lot of ways, right? But also
Yes.
not recognizing that I just honestly, I didn't have the skill set
Can
to
I
show up
jump
in life the
in?
way that I wanted
And
to.
I want to jump in real quick, Ginny. Your story, my story, it's almost, I mean, just the parallels are just shocking. Yeah. I mean, from childhood and on up. And, I used for so long because I like the way it made me feel. I'm not going to lie. But
Mhm.
also I used out of necessity because I had no idea who I was. I hated myself so much. I had
Yeah.
no self-esteem. I was destroyed emotionally and physically and mentally. That was the only way that I could escape. And I've
Yeah.
heard you talk about escape a couple times. And I know we have a lot of young listeners that listen to this, my show too, that may be going through this kind of thing. And can you talk about just the using out of necessity or using out of the
Yeah.
need to escape reality? And just, a lot of people don't understand that if they're not in this kind of world that you and I, or maybe other people have been involved in.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know that I intellectualized it at the time. When I
Yeah.
first started using, I didn't like the way that drugs made me feel until I smoked crack cocaine.
Yes.
When I smoked crack cocaine, I felt like I made it to the place that I was going to stay for the rest of my life. That was the answer to all of my problems.
10 minutes later.
Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
came down and I needed
Yeah.
another one. And I spent the rest of my time chasing that. Right. So
Me
I
too.
don't know that I intellectualized the fact that it was, out of necessity or escape. It just became
Okay.
the lifestyle. It was the natural progression or evolution of my life and the environment that I grew up in, honestly.
Sure.
So I think that probably I recognized initially for me personally, because of where I came from, that it was literally my path to acceptance and love because I didn't receive that
Yes.
in my home. And so it's really not until much later in life, like after the age of 40, that I've been able to sort of dismantle the entire
Mhm.
process to inspect myself, right? To inventory. And I'm huge on really sort of knowing who I am and why I've done the things that I've done. And not to necessarily make excuses, even though that was a part of it for me for a long time. It's like, oh, well, these are the reasons and that makes it okay. But more so I can be the best facilitator, so to speak, to help people recognize things within themselves so that maybe their path doesn't have to be as painful as mine was. Right. So, but
100%.
the thing is that one of the really interesting things is that, and I think we can, if we look really within ourselves, we can see how easily and heavily influenced we are by the personalities around us. And I see it with every
Yeah.
single person, even the strongest of people, right? But we're social creatures. We're social creatures and we mimic each other. That is how we learn. And so when we learn that we're the oddball out, it takes a very strong person to know that you're the odd man out. And today I see it differently, right? Like my youngest kid, all of my kids really, but I see it mostly with my youngest, who is so unique and strives so much to be accepted by the people around her. And her uniqueness is such a strength that is going to serve her. But
Incredible.
it's through looking at her life that I've been able to see where I shot myself in the foot over and over, right? And it's almost impossible to convince, especially when we're teenagers, to convince somebody how powerful their uniqueness is, how okay it is, right?
Oh,
And we try to
100%.
get, yeah, it's because it's so confusing and it's so hard because when you have 50 voices
Mhm.
around you saying, no, you need to do this like us, even if that's not the direct message that's being given, like that is often what's communicated, right? And I think we see it, Beau, really with all of what we see with harm reduction, right? We see, okay,
Yeah, no, please go
yeah,
ahead.
okay, because I'm going to
You
tell
have the
you,
floor on this.
one of the things, so I worked in social services for a number of years and I felt like I was killing my friends. Okay. So I come from being a dope fiend. A lot of the people that I was serving were people that I was on the streets with or in prison with. And when I went to work in that field, I had to find the blessing that I was providing because I had a problem pushing other people's agendas, people who hadn't come from where we had come from. Okay. And
Yeah,
what they were having me give to those people was rotten fish.
absolutely. And no
And
lived experience
none,
whatsoever. I'm
none
assuming.
whatsoever. And one of the things that I think is really common with folks who come out of the carceral setting or out of homelessness and addiction is that we have beaten ourselves down so low, and we've allowed external messages to become our messages, that when we look in the mirror, we feel like a failure. We feel like everything we've done is always wrong. We don't always recognize, you know what, though? I'm this age, whether it's 30, whether it's 25, whether it's 42, whether it's 51, we don't recognize that, you know what? But here, I've made it to here, and I've made it to here on my own, right?
Which
And
takes
so
a
we
lot
don't,
of stones.
what's that?
It takes a lot of chutzpah, stones. It takes a
Well,
lot of strength
It does. Look
to
at,
do it on your own.
hey man, you can pull the dope fiend out of the hood, and have
Yeah.
them succeed in corporate America. But I don't know about you. You ever been in a dope house when a corporate America person lands there on their weekend bender and they essentially walk out with nothing on? So it's a little bit different. Not to
Maybe.
say that they can't acclimate to the environment, right? But like, I don't think that we always recognize, because we're not taught to, and I don't think it's malicious on the part of society, because I think that I truly have to give people grace. Otherwise, I walk around pissed off all the time, right? People do the best they can with what they have. If you knew
100%.
better, you'd do better, right? So in social services, I was handing out rotten fish. That's what I was doing. And so, this idea of harm reduction is a very similar thing. They convince a lot of us who don't know how to look outside of what we've done, right? When you look in the mirror, have you ever seen all the things that you've done? And so you can't value the person that's looking back at you. Because that was my reality for a long time. I hated myself. Like you said, I hated myself.
100%. And I think, Ginny, tell me if I'm wrong on this. You may know more about it than me. I feel like today, if you come out against harm reduction, somehow you're painted as a bad person who's,
oh yeah, they try to paint me as a bad
they try to
person all
paint
the
you as
time.
like you're cold hearted and you have no, but which is just absolute horseshit.
Well, it is. Well, this is the thing. So I ended up going to school, right? So I work in social services. I'm not comfortable with the fish that I'm giving out. I do my best to try to help folks, but I don't have autonomy in the roles that I'm in to actually help people get their life together. And also, it's kind of like dropping the rat in the maze, right? And they're going through the maze. And then as soon as they get near the exit, the door drops down. And then the rat is rewarded for failing. And that is what we're doing to people. So, and there's this whole other thing, and people can say or think whatever they want, but who is pushing the harm reduction model? Pharma.
Bingo.
It's pharma. They're the biggest dope dealer in the world. Okay?
I used to say the VA because I'm a veteran, and I used to say, I've been Puget Sound, all over the West Coast. I used to say the VA hospitals had the biggest drug dealer on planet Earth.
But they're just pushing pharma. They're pushing pharma's agenda.
And they're a conduit from pharma to the patient.
Everybody's a conduit. And that's the thing right now is everybody's a conduit. And if we think there aren't if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Let's just put that out there.
Oh, I mean,
they're pushing the narratives in our colleges. I went to UW as a grown-up, and I was around a bunch of really brilliant kids. And, and I have a lot of great network connections, but there's a tremendous amount of indoctrination that's happening in our education system.
Yeah.
Those systems are what's driving our nonprofit system. Our nonprofit system is very exploitative. And I'm not saying every single nonprofit is, but the majority, they're very exploitative. If you're not sick, I'm not funded. If you're not sick, I'm not funded.
That's crazy. And it's true, but it's crazy to think that there's people that actually prey on people like that. And it just, for the almighty dollar. I mean, it's sickening because if you, not you, but if anyone listening to this, if anybody has been in so deep into this insidious disease, that you are just such a raw shell to be taken advantage of. And it's just, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, and it's true. And so that is why exactly right there, because of that raw shell that is easily taken advantage of, that's why we're so susceptible to believing the masses, right? So if there are 50 voices that tell you that the sky is purple, or I don't know, think of it, the sky is green. I think I like green better because sometimes it's a little purpley.
Sure,
The sky is green, right? If 50 people walk out and the sky is blue, you're like, no,
No, it's great.
That's not green, but they keep bashing you down, and you're going to not gain entry into something because you're not agreeing with those voices. Well, it starts to convince us, right? Our brains believe whatever we tell it, first of all.
Absolutely.
And when we have done nothing but disregard ourselves because of the things that we've done in the past and tell ourselves this messaging that says, I'm obviously a failure, I'm not enough, I need to, what I'm doing, we look at everything in black and white, us and them, right? And so the us's, we're failures. Well, they're not. So we need to find out from them what they're doing. Well, they have never been where we've been. If you haven't been to hell, you don't know how to navigate your way out of it, right? And so, and that's, I work hard, and at first I didn't know how to accept. I am called an advocate everywhere. I didn't know how to accept that because it's kind of like peers, right? People that are with the label of peer, they're looked at like the bottom rung, and but you know what?
Peer support.
I'm right. And the bottom line is we're actually the experts.
Yes.
We're the experts. And so, but I'm an advocate with individuals for who they are, truly, inherently, the strong, amazing person that they are.
Yes.
Right? I am an advocate for free thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an advocate for independent thinking. I am an advocate for spiritual connection. I am an advocate for policy and system change. And then, of course, there's the work that I do, right? So that's what I do in my spare time.
Yeah.
And then there's the work that I do. I work on government initiatives with the state of Tennessee to change the face of social services, not to be a hand out, but a hand up, and truly focus on where people's deficits are. Because if we don't assess deficit, we cannot call anything a success if we're not gauging and measuring the progress that an individual moves toward, if in fact they are immersed in any kind of social services, and that the services actually helps that individual to strengthen that deficit so that they can become independent on the other side. The only thing that we measure in that system is inputs that are addressing symptoms. We are not trying to develop a nation of people with improved quality of life so that they can be independent and not bleed us financially, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like you're thinking something.
Well, I am. No, this is fascinating. And what I'm thinking is that I want to go back to where, you're talking about your daughter. I think it was your daughter being so unique. We're using that example.
Yeah.
So forever, I've had some horrible mugshots. I'm a 6'4", 220-pound man. I've been down to 168 pounds, scabbed, the whole whatever. But for a long time, people would look at me and say, "You're a normal dude. You speak normal. How could you have gone to the pen these times, or gone to jail those times, or been addicted?" And the thing is that we get taken advantage of, I think, by big pharma, by these people that want to push their agenda on people that are very susceptible to being taken advantage of, as we've talked about. And I hate it. And I'm going to go back to that real quick. I always felt like, I give the analogy like, okay, here's the mainland of the United States of America. And then there's Hawaii and the little islands out here. And I just felt like I was Hawaii out here, and I just never fit in with the rest of the 48 states, I guess, Alaska, you know what I mean? Does that make like the jigsaw puzzle? There was one last piece to fit into the puzzle. And it was little old weird Beau who didn't fit in anywhere, all by myself, hating myself, and then just doing drugs to try to make myself feel better. And nobody ever really tried to tell me that I could do something else with my life besides I don't know, I guess, and I want to tell you a quick story. So I was in Spokane, 2002, on the streets, sick as hell, shooting dope, donating plasma, obviously for money. And I go in there and I get a note from the doctor, or my sister's coaching at Gonzaga. She's a basketball coach, and I'm using her address. She somehow gets a hold of me and says, "Hey, you got a note from the plasma clinic. You have to go see the doctor." And I'm like, "Oh God." So it's one of two things. It's HIV or it's hepatitis C. And back in 2002, HIV was really still, it was killing people. Mm-hmm. And so I go in there and the doctor says, "Sit down." And he says, "Mr. Payne, I'm here to tell you you've tested positive for the virus that causes." And then it was like, I swear it was like the longest 1 second of my life. And he said, "Hepatitis C." And I jumped off the bed and I like swung my fist like that in celebration. And he says, that's the strangest reaction I've ever seen from an individual that just found out that they have a fatal disease. And I said, it ain't AIDS, doc. It ain't AIDS. And that's exactly, and I hate myself for saying that at the time.
Yeah.
But then my sister was or she came in and we talked. And I said, well, what can my brother do? And the doc says, I don't know, quit using drugs, but I have another patient. And that was it. Mm-hmm. And that night I was shooting dope, you know. And that's how
dope for years after I got hepatitis C, but I can relate.
I got cured I took Harvoni in 2015 or 14, that one pill a day thing. And so I got cured from it. But my point is that they almost look at us like drug addict, unfixable, go away. And
well, I want to give them some grace, right?
Well, that's what I was going to get to. Go ahead, Ginny. Well, I was just going to say, but then that gets to the point to where we talk about grace and you say that you can't see. People ask me all the time, how can I forgive my father? How can I forgive all these people that, sexually abused me and all this stuff? And I say, because I am in the helping business and I'm not going to walk around angry and pissed off and jammed up inside because I'm no good to anybody like that. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to completely forgive them or like them but it does mean that I can just kind of be ambivalent towards it. And what I had to do, Ginny, when I found out who I was, and I'm going to speak in the third person real quick, and I used to never do that, but when I found out who Beau Payne really was, is when I did a deep intrinsic dive for years, starting at about age 40, going in and out of prison. Who are you? Who do I want to be? Mm-hmm. Okay, I have these people saying now that, okay, you can do this. You have talent. I was drafted by, professional big league baseball teams, the Marlins, and, and all this stuff, and had this big double life kind of, juxtaposed. And it wasn't until I started looking deep inside that I started to believe in myself. And then in prison, when I got better, my third term, when I stopped sitting at the card table and doing meth instead, and going to the rec yard and helping these guys that couldn't play sports, that felt inadequate, and they were getting beat down all the time by all these big athletes that they asked me to play on their team. I'm like, no, I'm going to coach these. We're just going to call them misfits or whatever, bad news bears. And I learned to be in service, to start helping people, swinging a bat, shooting a jump shot, making themselves feel good about themselves. And that way that translated on the prison yard, on the rec yard, translated to how they would walk to chow, how they would walk to services, not puffed up and peacocking and stuff, but confident in themselves. And to me, when I saw that I had a little bit of that help and, and making somebody feel better about themselves, I realized that may have been at the time my intention and my purpose in my life. And I've carried it out for years now. And I know that you talk about grace. We have to give people grace. And we have to, and I know you help people so much as far as, and I heard you talk about, you want to help people feel better about themselves, because when we don't feel good about ourselves, we cannot do anything well at all, and I need to be at 100%. So can you talk to us about just maybe a seminal moment in your life to where you realize service and helping people is really the way to go for you?
Yeah, well, okay. So, there's so much.
And grace. And we can.
I want to touch a little bit on forgiveness. And so, forgiveness is for me. It's not for somebody else.
Yes.
Because when I don't forgive, I'm the one that's toxic on the inside. It has nothing to do with the other person. Yeah. Right. But another thing that's beautiful for me, and it's come through this process of service, is that, how am I going to celebrate you, Beau, as a person who has done things, similar to those people that I want to judge and hate for the rest of my life? How can I accept you while not also accepting them? How can I look at myself and find self-forgiveness, if not also forgive those? To recognize my own inabilities, shortcomings, and I think hitting corners, right? Because the more I learn who I am, the more I learn who everybody else is. And so that's where I really find my forgiveness, right? And so when I first got out in 2013, I was facing a 4th prison sentence, but I trusted this guy who told me not to take a deal. He helped me get an attorney, and I ended up doing drug court. So they dropped some of my charges. They
I
transferred.
did drug court too. So
Yeah, they transferred my stuff from Tacoma to Seattle.
Okay.
I had been on a talk show in 2010, right after I got out of prison, with Dan Satterberg, the DA for Seattle. And so we used that as leverage. And so I was able to get my stuff transferred. But I went and I started volunteering for the post-prison education program before Ari Cohn died. And what I was doing is I was talking to guys inside of prison and essentially sharing my stuff. And so that was my first.
So you would go into men's prisons like Qualm Bay or Walla Walla, Coyote Ridge,
all over the state. I currently have a program that's inside of the Washington State Department of Corrections, and we'll be expanding into other stuff. A program that I developed. It's the process that I implemented in my own life back then when I got arrested last time on 12/5/12. My clean date is 12/6/12 because, of course, I had dope in my bra. And if you think I flushed that shit, you're tripping.
Yeah, there's no such thing as leftover crack.
I'm a dope fiend, and I was it was mine, and I was doing
leftover,
it. Yeah. So, but what I started doing is I started answering the phone to these guys, and I started speaking inside of prisons. And so,
awesome.
So that's really where my heart for the work that I'm doing, part of it came from.
Yeah.
But, it's been an accumulation of things over the years, right? And I've always been, even in my addiction, if I care about you and you're my friend, like there's a tremendous amount of loyalty. And if I got it, you got it. I had a drug dealer that used to say to me all the time, Fida, he used to call me Fida because I used to fight a lot, fight the women, and people would underestimate me.
Wild one.
That's fine.
Well, you were on a boat in Alaska, so let's not underestimate you.
I'm like, we could underestimate me if you want to. I was born and raised in the Briar Patch. So I got a whole lot of get down in me. And so
I bet.
You can only have your face beat in so many times before you're like, enough is enough, dude. So, and that stuff happened at home. So, I mean, and that's not to say I haven't had my licks in society, because I definitely have, but I'm not going to go down with my ass in the air, essentially. So there's that.
I got you.
But I'll tell you this though. I mean, there are some aspects of service that I didn't like in the rooms, like people wanting to ride home when I finally got a car. Half the time I don't want to be bothered with other people, but I pray about service. And I would pray, please God, help me to do this until I like it. Right. Mm-hmm. Same thing with running. My legs felt like they were 500 pounds.
Yeah. You're a runner. That's right.
Well, I have an injury right now. So I have a torn hamstring tendon. I've been dealing with it for 9 months. So I haven't been able to climb, cycle, run, or anything, but we're working on that because it's a huge part of my mental health. Right.
Mine too. Yeah. I understand completely.
But yeah, so today what my life looks like is it's immersed in service, because the antidote to me is you, right? And so I'm a self-centered person. Leave me to my own devices and I will focus on myself. But when I am focused on helping other people, and you had made a statement, I am an advocate for people loving themselves, but this is the thing. Like, I don't try to I will tell people what I think they do is great, but like, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. If I'm feeding your ego, it's temporary, right? It's like doing a shot of dope. It's going to freaking wear off. The only time that something is going to be truly meaningful for another person is when they say it and believe it themselves, to themselves. And so, and with the program that I have in the Washington State Department of Corrections, that's what I teach. I teach people how to turn their messaging around. And so there's a number of things that I teach, but that's definitely one of them. I've developed something that I call the village. How do you succeed? How do you raise a child? You have to become the village, right? So I've developed a concept of that works with the Department of Corrections, individuals inside, myself, and then of course community partnerships for warm handoffs and relationship building, and in different areas, education, employment, all kinds of different things. And so we're running successfully. We, as in myself, I finally hired somebody else. And then the show that I'm doing, I have a docuseries. It's called Modern America. I focus on the real life stories on the other side of policy. All the work that I'm doing is to focus on policy change in the area of services and incarceration, because we are denying people right now in our society, specifically over the last 4 years, we're denying people the opportunity to find the Ginny inside of them.
Yeah.
So we're not arresting people. We're pumping them full of drugs that kill them. And we're calling those things solutions, and the people like us that work in those fields sometimes forget where they came from and they're buying into the hype, right? Because, well, if 75 people are saying it, well, who am I to think that I'm wrong? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I question.
That's where the critical thinking comes in and the challenging narratives. You know what I mean?
I question everything, and I bump up against all kinds of stuff. And
absolutely.
I had a dream in 2012 when I was locked up, 2013 before I got out. I don't know exactly when it was, but that, there were thousands of people in Stadium High School. And they were all dressed in wedding white, and everybody was piling down the big stairwells into the abyss. And I was standing on a platform. Literally everybody was in wedding white. I had a blue dress on with black polka dots. There was a presence behind me, and I was strongly urged not to run down those stairs, not to go with everybody else that I knew and loved. And more as I watched this last number of years transpire, and even though I've had people try to bump up against me, they don't challenge my story, but sometimes they try to challenge my philosophy, which I don't care. You don't have to agree with me.
They sound like bureaucrats anyways.
Yeah. So. You don't have to agree with me about stuff. And I always love it when a politician tries to tell me how I'm wrong.
Funders and bureaucrats. And
ask them, well, what worked for you when you stopped shooting dope? How did you get out of the tent? You know what I mean? And I'll say that in open house judiciary meetings or whatever. And, usually the response is, well, I have my own stuff. I'm sure that you do. So, but why don't you help me understand how you stopped shooting up? Well, I've never been an addict. Thank you. Mic drop. And so
thank you. Boom.
I just don't participate in the shenanigans. You know what I mean? But see, God told me, and I talk to God every single day, and I have an intimate relationship. And God told me not to follow the path. He told me not to follow the crowd, and he told me what I was supposed to be doing. And the more I show up for what I was told, the more doors to open and the more expansive my path becomes. And then the more I get people behind me, because you know what? People are looking for the route to be okay with themselves.
Yes.
What society teaches us, they're just following each other around. And hey, I ain't mad at them, right? They're doing what they think is right, but they're hitting those doors that are dropped down in the maze, and then they're being rewarded for failing. Well, I'm tired of running into those brick walls.
I think it's a small group of puppet masters that control a lot of people,
Yeah, me too.
And it's people like you who fight back against it that actually make a difference.
Yeah.
And there are other Ginny Burtons around the country, around the world. Thank you so much. I mean, it's incredible. Man, I agree with just not 99.9. I agree with 100% on what you said. And real quick, and we will wrap up soon because I know you're busy. You said something though about, helping people love themselves, but until they can actually believe it and say it themselves, that's when the real magic kind of happens, because I had a lot of people, say, hey man, you can do this, you can do that. But I was so beat down and I was so insecure and I had all this arrogance to cover up all this lousy way I felt about myself. But when I had enough time, like my last term I did was 46 months and I had enough time away to really be like, okay, let's analyze and I had a couple God moments too, where I really came to believe in my spirituality, and I've carried that with me to this day, every day, like you said yourself. But I said, man, maybe you're not so bad, dude. Mm-hmm. And the cleaner I got, and the more that I just trusted God and said, please help me and find out who I am, the more I started believing in myself. And then I was telling you about how I helped the men on the record and this and that, and I just feel like I'm unstoppable and not in a bad way, but just because I know who I am.
Well, that's what God wants for all of us, right?
I believe that. Yeah.
We can't fulfill our purpose if we're busy putting ourselves under these wet, moldy layers of BS.
Yes.
That we're driving ourselves into desolation. And so,
completely.
And that's not where we have to shine, especially in today's world. We're in such a different time in the world today. Yeah. People are looking for hope, because there's a flame inside of all of us, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it doesn't ever go out. but it can be covered up really easily. And people, when they look at you or they look at me or they look at Brianna and they're like, I can identify with that. If she can do it or he can do it, so can I. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And if we don't have that self-confidence, because we've said these things to ourselves, and I want you to know there's a portion, I started in module 2, there's 10 modules in my curriculum, and it's a minimum of about 6 months. No, I have people write lists and saying them in front of themselves in the mirror. I got some grown, tough, roughneck guys, and they're like, okay, I was saying it in the mirror in the bathroom. They're like, but somebody came in and saw us like playing it off. Look, I don't care, whatever.
We're all tatted from head to toe.
Handheld mirror. Say it in the screen of your JP4 player. But like, you need to be looking at the dude that you don't respect, and you need to redevelop that messaging, right?
And it's retraining our brain almost too, like on a 24-hour circuit too. Like for forever, I looked in the mirror, Ginny, and I'd side eye myself. I could not look. Could not look in the mirror at myself because I hated myself.
I cried the first time that I truly looked at myself and said that I love you. At first, I was just looking at my image, but when I looked into my own eyes, you know, when I finally got to a place where because I got to that same place, Beau, where I was like, well, maybe you're not that bad. And I had to assess it, right? I have friends that have been in my life since I was in the 3rd grade. If I was that bad, I wouldn't have anybody in my life. And I was like,
100%.
You know, where did these messages come from? Are they mine? Did I always believe that? And so I really started to dismantle it, right? And I stopped complicating everything.
Yes.
I made it super simple. These are the things on this side of the list that I'm doing. Well, what's the opposite of that? And not
just a simple pros and cons list or a profit and loss column, you know?
It's like, okay, doing drugs. Okay, what's the opposite of that? Not don't do drugs, but what do I want to do, right? We need to develop the route out, make it super simple, and then I ask myself, and this is what I teach my kid. I'm like, are the things you're doing today moving you in the direction of who you want to be? And if not, then how are you going to redirect? Is this decision is going to Starbucks and getting a 3,000 calorie beverage helping you to become fit, right? If not, okay, well, what are you going to exchange that with? Well, we can do it one thing at a time. Right? I'm going to go exchange that with a smoothie that I make in my own kitchen that doesn't have a bunch of BS in it. Right? So it's like, it's really, I try to simplify my life. I use the same framework and I move it around to other areas. Right now I'm working on relationship stuff because of course I have a Penske truck full of baggage and, you know, it's one day at a time with everything, right? It's one day at a time.
It is one day at a time. And it's like we say sometimes, it's as simplified as the next right thing, you know, and I think we as human beings know what the next right thing is. Sometimes we're just not always apt to do it. I.e. my energy drink right here. Now I feel guilty now.
I mean, one day at a time.
But you're right though, you know, I mean, I used to drink 4 or 5 of them and now I'm down to about 1 of them, but.
Well, and if you have pain and inflammation, this is the thing. So I stopped eating sugar, I stopped wheats, and I stopped caffeine all around December because I started having spine compression, and my pain decreased upwards of between 85 and 90% just by eliminating those things. Incredible. You know, I did the same things when I quit smoking because I was like doing mountain stuff, right? Does smoking cigarettes and hiking and backpacking and climbing, are they synonymous?
I see you in Red Rocks and, you know, all these beautiful places. But you can't be smoking a pack of menthols and hiking out, you know, I mean, that just is not going to work. But
for me, it didn't. And so, you know, and I make these lists, right? It's just like, okay, why do I smoke? Okay, but now what is the truth, right? And I have it on my board at home in my office. It's like, why am I eating these foods? What am I saying to myself? And what's the truth about them, right? And so the truth is that they make me have brain fog. They cause me to swell up in the middle. You know what I mean? They make my skin break out or whatever. So am I actually getting out of them what it is that I'm telling myself? And so I try to hold myself to a standard where, you know, and I'm not perfect at this. It's one little step at a time. Sometimes it's 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. Sometimes it's 7 forward and 10 back. You know, but I just keep getting up and moving forward no matter what it is that I do.
That's what my mom always said, and we'll wrap it up with this. She always says, "Beau, we live in the what is, not the what if." And if you
That's
just
right.
sometimes, if the least you can do is put your left foot in front of the right, breathe and repeat, and live to fight another day, you're doing okay.
That's how you get to the summit.
And that's how
You
you
don't
get
get
to the
to the
summit.
summit by wishing it.
You sure don't. It takes action.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, Ginny, let's wrap it up. I can't tell you what a wonderful hour it's been. Just informative. I've been a huge admirer of yours for years. I'm glad we finally got to speak face to face. Your story is incredible. You know that. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Just
thanks so much for having me on the show. If you are interested in learning more about the work that I'm doing,
yes,
please visit www.vginny, Burton, BURTON.com. You can learn about the show that I'm doing, which is Modern America. You can follow the episodes. We have 31 episodes out right now. And we're going to be traveling around the United States, telling how the real life stories from multiple perspectives about what's failing in our policy system.
Fantastic. And we'll get some of that in the show notes too, Brianna. And Ginny, if you'd stay with us just for a minute or two when we wrap up. And Brianna, do you have anything for Ginny? I know this has been a wonderful hour.
Yeah, it was really spectacular, everything that you had to talk about. It's interesting that you talked about the retraining your mind, because back when I was in prison, I had a journal. And in the journal, there was rules everybody just journals their feelings, but mine had rules. In order for me to retrain how I react to things or with my emotions, I literally had to do the opposite of what I was supposed to do while I was journaling. So for example, if I was really upset because I felt like nobody loved me, right? Then I would literally it took hours to even come up with what to say. And I would only come up with a paragraph about this long, but it would start off like journaling exactly the opposite to myself, like that inner magical child of what being loved is. And so it would be like, Brianna, you are loved. You have to love yourself. You know what I mean? So it would just be something that, because I'm crying, I'm thinking, the worst, what that feeling is, it's really deep. And so it kind of helped me to get it out in a healthier way by telling myself the opposite. And then when I was upset, I could go back and read something that was fully honest from myself to myself, because I trust myself more than anybody else. So when I would feel that way again, I would just go back and read, wow, you are worthy, you are loving, here's why, here's how, you have a purpose, you just need to look deeper inside yourself. And all this stuff, I'm like, wow, I wrote that to myself when I was truly upset, when I was truly feeling the pain. And to try to reverse that psychology in your mind, with practice, it actually did help me for a long time, because in the beginning, my first few years, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror for what I had done. And so it was really, really a struggle. And I really don't think I even looked at myself in the mirror, honestly, until I was able to get out and feel different from the sentence, that I had to serve. And so I really think that it's empowering what you have to offer by trying to change the mindset of the people. And, I've often had that. Sometimes I tell people on my channel, there's an officer that writes me, and I tell her stories sometimes. And she always talks about things that she tries to implement differently with inmates. And sometimes I talk about how it would be really interesting with officers if you put therapists in officers' positions. You know what I mean? Because then they're treating through action something completely different. And we're able to adapt more to something that is through action. And when you're constantly being treated like crap, it doesn't make you want to change. It just it beats you down further than you're already feeling about what you've done and who you've done it to and why you're there and what you've lost and everything else. And it just doesn't help you to change the way that you feel about yourself or the way that you treat others. And so I just feel like the whole thing really does need to change. And I'm really glad that you are an advocate for it. It's impressive.
Thanks, Brianna.
That's impressive. Brianna's become a really good friend of mine, not only a producer, but just somebody who I try to look out for. She's been out for about 18 months and she's just doing fantastic and just killing it. And I could not be more proud of her as a friend and somebody I work with too. So, so proud of you too, Ginny. Thank you so much. For coming on. I hope you come back maybe in the fall, maybe do a part 2 and let everyone know what you're doing and how your stuff's going and everything like that. So, All right, ladies and gentlemen, sports fans. Oh, go ahead, Ginny.
No, I was just saying, thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's our pleasure, believe me. So that's another episode down, I believe, episode 13. So we're rolling along. So until then, everybody, we really appreciate everybody listening in. Until then, live your very, very best life, and I'm out.